you'll understand everything about the new upcoming 4-star buffer, who is also known as Iansan. Starting with Iansan herself, she's a polearm user, and her role is mainly that of a buffer, so she's a 4-star buffer. Now talking about Iansan, she gives attack percentage with her ascension, giving a total of 24% attack at level 90. Going to her normal attacks, they aren't that special. She just hits 3 times, and her charged attack is the same as any other 4-star polearm user. However, if you're in her Night Soul state, her charged attacks get converted into a special AoE electro damage attack. Going to her skill, Iansan dashes forward, dealing electro damage to enemies, and just like Varesa, if you perform a normal attack within 5 seconds of using her skill, she'll use her charged attack, and it won't consume any stamina. As for the skill itself, after using it, her Night Soul points will be restored to a maximum, which is 54 points, and it'll increase Iansan's movement speed and jump height as well. And if you hold the sprint button, Iansan will enter her rush mode, and it'll increase her speed and jump height even more. Other than that, while in this mode, she can even perform leaps like Varesa and run over water and lava. However, running on liquids will consume her Night Soul points at a much faster rate. Going to her burst, it costs 70 energy, and after using it, Iansan deals AoE electro damage and brings out a thing called Kinetic Energy Scale. This will also give Iansan 15 Night Soul points. Now, think about this scale as a mini pet. And what this scale does is it'll follow the active character around, buffing the attack of your current active character in different ways based on Iansan's Night Soul points. Now, hold your horses, don't replace Benny Boy just yet. So if she has less than 42 Night Soul points, the attack bonus will be based on her Night Soul points plus her attack. And if she has more than or at least 42 Night Soul points, then the buff will purely be based on her attack. Additionally, the kinetic scale has a pretty unique feature. So while it's active, it'll measure the distance moved by your current active character, and based on that it'll restore Night Soul points to Iansan. However, it cannot measure Iansan's own distance moved, so you have to use someone other than Iansan to use this feature. These might be a lot to take in, so let's recap the things in a nutshell if just in case anything confused you. So this is Iansan. Her main role is that of a buffer. Her charged attacks deal AoE electro damage if she's in her Night Soul state. Her skill restored her Night Soul points as well as increases her movement speed. And lastly, her burst did AoE electro damage and buffed your character's attack based on how many Night Soul points she had. So overall, how you'd want to play with her is, you use her skill once to max out the Night Soul points, then do a normal attack once, which will trigger an automatic charged attack. This step is required for the first passive, which we'll talk about in a second. And lastly, use her burst and move around with your characters to maintain that buff. Now that that's done, let's look at all her multipliers. Also, as for her talent leveling priority, you'd want to level up her elemental burst first, then her elemental skill, and lastly her normal attack. Now starting with her passives, in her first passive, whenever Iansan's special charged attack hits opponents, she'll get her effect called the Precise Movement for 15 seconds. What this buff will do is, it'll increase her attack by 20%, and whenever she regains Night Soul points through the Kinetic Energy Scale, she'll regain 1 extra point. Additionally, when your current active character consumes or restores Night Soul points, then the extra Night Soul points she gains will be increased to 4 instead of 1. Her second passive turns her into a healer, as now, when a party member triggers Night Soul Burst, then Iansan will obtain the warming up effect for 10 seconds, and if she recovers at least 1 Night Soul point during this time, she'll heal your current active character for 60% of her attack. However, this effect can only be triggered once every 2.8 seconds. Her third passive just talks about Night Soul transmission, and the last passive says that she'll regain 10 phlogiston points inside Natlon when the phlogiston levels drop below 50%. However, this can only trigger once every 10 seconds. Now looking at her builds, since she's a polearm user, you'd want to take any polearm that gives attack percentage or revolve around energy recharge. Some suggestions would be Calamity Queller, Engulfing Lightning, Favonius Lance, Tommyurati, and Wave Breaker's Fin. We took these weapons because they give either attack percentage in their substats or energy recharge, and the passives revolve around providing ER or attack. As for her artifacts, her best artifact is going to be the Scroll of the Hero of Cinder, and in terms of stats, for the main stats, you'd want attack percentage or energy recharge on Sans. As to what to choose, go with attack percentage if you have around 170 to 180% ER on her, and if not, then go with energy recharge. For Goblet, go with attack percentage again, and lastly for Circlet, you should go with attack percentage rather than crit, since a lot of things like her healing and attack buff are based on her attack, so an attack Circlet will be better here. As for the substats, you'd want an ER of around 170 to 180%, flat attack or attack percentage, and crit. As for her teams, you could use something like Varesa, Me, Iansan, and Xinyan. Or you could replace Varesa with Clorand, Me with Mavuika, and Xinyan with Chevreuse. If not these, then you could replace Clorand with Kinich and Chevreuse with Emily. You get the overall idea of how she works. She's a buffer, so you can use her in teams you'd normally use Bennett in. Talking about Bennett, you might be wondering who's better? So overall, without Constellations, Bennett remains the more consistent and easier to run support, while Iansan's potential is high but more dependent on team mobility and precise play. So if both of them were C6, Bennett would be more consistent, while Iansan has a higher ceiling if you can meet her specific conditions. So no, our Benny boy still remains strong, however he does have a rival now. Now talking about Constellations, her C1 says that she'll restore 15 elemental energy for every 6 night soul points she consumes. However, this effect can only trigger once every 18 seconds. Her C2 improves her first passive, as now right after using her burst, she'll gain the precise movement effect, so there's no need to use your charged attack on the enemies. Additionally, if Iansan is off-field while this buff is active, she will also increase your current active character's attack by 30%. Her C3 just increases her skill level by 3. Her C4 improves her ability to restore Night Soul points, as now when the kinetic energy scale is active on the field, and your current active character other than Iansan uses their elemental burst, Iansan will gain 2 stacks of a buff. What these buffs do is, now whenever Iansan restores Night Soul points via the kinetic energy scale, she will consume 1 stack from the buff and restore 4 additional Night Soul points. Additionally, if while regaining Night Soul points it overflows, meaning goes beyond the 54 Night Soul point limit, she will regain 50% of the overflow the next time she restores her Night Soul points via the scale. So if 4 points overflowed, you'll gain back 2 extra points the next time she regains her points. Her C5 increases the level of her burst by 3. Finally, in her C6, the kinetic scale's duration is increased by 3 seconds, and if there's any overflow, then she will gain an effect, which will increase the damage dealt by your current active character by 25% for 3 seconds. Now, as for her best constellation, it's easily C6, followed by C2 and C1. Now lastly, should you get her? Well, Iansan is a versatile character that excels as a support buffer. She's pretty valuable for movement-heavy teams as well, and her best selling point has to be the ability to let the characters move around and not keeping them stationary. While nothing game-breaking, Iansan's ability to provide buffs and somewhat low healing makes her a solid choice for a lot of teams. So overall, she's definitely worth pulling for, if you want a buffer or just want to enjoy the funny animations.